Get us rocking and rolling. Sorry about the last minute reschedule there.
That's good. I mean, horses are always number one.
Horses are
Is
still
horse okay?
get us rocking and rolling. Oops, let me mute my stream. Yeah, it's just like we had one come up with EPM and then we moved the farm, and like we've just had a lot of different things that we've had to deal with lately.
Sorry to hear that. Hopefully it's not so bad now and got it under control.
That is the goal. I think we're all good for now, but it is horses. So, you know.
All right. So let's dive right in. You have some awesome topics.
Yeah.
What I thought I would do is I share my screen if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
And then you ask the question, and I'm going to try to explain it with the question you had. This was your first question, I believe. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I sure can. And for everyone watching now and or later, we're covering saddle shopping tips, and I asked you guys what questions you had and put together a little doc of them. So we'll be covering those things today. So the first question is they all begin with, when saddle shopping? Is always a fun endeavor. What are the three most important things you would say to look for, like your top three?
Yeah, so definitely if it's a gender appropriate saddle. Why is that so important? Because as a rider, we are born with a male or a female pelvis. And even in the female, you have 4 different pelvis shapes. And even if a male, the type of pelvis can be different to the measurement. All in all, we have adductor muscles, we have gluteus maximus muscles, but the bone structure has to fit to the tree of the saddle. And when I'm born, and this is a sensitive topic, Jill, but when these days, I don't know if you heard that as well, there is a different movement now where some people don't want to be identified as male or a female. Okay, so, or they have sometimes later on in their life sex change or gender change. And if that's the case, you are born with a skeleton, and in saddle fitting or saddle shopping, that skeleton has to fit to the skeleton of the saddle. And that skeleton, we on the saddle name tree, saddle tree. And in the rider, there is 2 main pelvises, massive difference. It's the one what has the ability to bear a child. I'm just talking about now bones. And the other bone pelvis has not the ability. Now, also you see in the small picture beside the saddle here, these muscles. As a rider, we want to feel on the inner thigh how the saddle feels, how I get my leg on the horse. And that, of course, makes a huge difference. So I recommend, number 1 tip, when you when you shop for a saddle, you say, hey, I'm born with a female pelvis or I'm born with a male pelvis.
Right.
That saddle you have on sale at your shop, or what saddle is it? Okay, if they say, I don't know, no clue, then most likely it is a male saddle. If it's a female saddle, they will advertise that. So what will happen if you ignore that tip? What will happen if you say, okay, I can't find a female, I want a saddle, this is the number 1 important point, but I can't do it. So you buy a saddle what's made for pelvis what is much, much narrow. So you see the saddle on the left here.
Mm-hmm.
Right here where the number 8 is, where that area here is. Right in that spot. For the male saddle, it's completely different build. So the male don't hurt his parts. So right there is a point in the tree and in the seat foam made. So the male parts go left to right. Now you say, well, I used to be a female, now I have male parts, then that's perfect. And goes to the next. Seat bone width is by number 2, how wide the seat is in the back. So if you are a male and you have narrow seat bones, you feel like you're sitting on a 2x6 on a very wide piece of wood, and you can't get your leg around. If you're a female and you have a wide seat base there, that's perfect. Okay. So again, if you have a change in your physique, in your soft parts, this is now bones. Okay. And same here with number 3. That's where these abductor muscles, and which come from your pelvis to your thigh, here in the picture where it would be on the saddle. Okay. That is something you cannot change after you're born by surgical procedure. Okay. So
yeah, you mentioned if you were to per se get your parts changed, like a female to male transition, then having the pointier apex would make sense. Would then what you pointed to around 2 or 1, I think there on the graphic, would that then still need to be wide?
If you are female, absolutely.
Right, because of the wide seat bones.
Because you don't change your entire pelvis and your spine, right? You don't change that.
It's almost like we need sex appropriate saddles. And
well, you actually you hit the nail on the head. You know, it is, because gender is the part, and it should be. You know what? You're absolutely right, and I'm going to change this right now. It's sex appropriate saddle.
I know that word is like, it's a dirty word because it has a double meaning, but I agree.
but in the medical field, that's what it is. What sex have you born with? Right, and then the gender you can change. So that is for me the number 1, because if I can't get my leg on my horse and that doesn't fit right, or I am absolutely uncomfortable, I can't balance myself on the seat bones, why would I even go any further? The next thing, when I buy a saddle and I shop for a saddle, I would ask, is it a disposable or non-disposable saddle? So people who you're buying saddle from, they will either say, yes, it is a disposable, or no, it's not. If they say, I have no idea what you're talking about, then you would ask, well, can I change the saddle tree in the tree width and in the tree angle? And can I change the panel length and the flocking to the horse's shade? And then they will say yes or no. Most saddles are meant to, the horse change, the saddle doesn't fit anymore. The industry wants you to buy a new saddle. So if you shop a saddle and says, oh, if my horse gets more muscles, if he changes, then it doesn't matter. Then you can just go disposable, because you keep buying new saddles. If you say, well, I don't have that much money, I can't always buy a new saddle when my horse changes positive or negative. So now you can say, no, I would be interested in a non-disposable saddle. And that is a saddle what you or a saddle fitter can change. You know, for example, a Wintec, you can change the gullet plate, right? Or there are saddles, you have a little Allen key and you can change the saddle while it's together or while it's on the horse. You can make the different size.
I'll get to actually do it one of these days.
Yeah.
I've had such bad luck with every horse I measure seems to end up having some sort of issue. I can't ever get around to it. I'm doing my best, but I want to use that saddle so bad. It's just haunting me in the tack room.
Okay, so that's the number 2 question. You know, whenever you buy a saddle, can you adjust it or can you not? And in the industry, the nickname is disposable or non-disposable. And you got to remind, you know, what do people want? They want you to buy always a new saddle. If you don't want to do it, I strongly recommend to have a non-disposable, which means fully adjustable. So if they say it's fully adjustable, the next the next question I would ask, is the tree sound? And they say, yeah. Then you can say, can you send me a picture from the front, from the back? Is the tree broken or twist? Right. So that's what I mean with sound. And then kind of what I alluded already in the second question, is the tree independently adjustable in the tree width and the tree angle and vice versa?
Most are adjustable only in the width, correct?
In the
But-
angle, right? So that you have different angles this way.
Mhm.
But very often you can't open just the top.
Okay.
You see that. So if you as a rider, you have a horse and it's developing nice, got a nice top line. Everybody says, "Boy, Jill, look at the neck on this horse. Look at the
Mhm.
top line on this horse." Okay, they could bring the rump up, they get a higher withers, and now you just make the angle wider. No, it sits on the withers or it pinches on these muscles you worked so hard to get on your horse.
Right.
Okay, and then of course, horses are not always symmetric. Horses are born without a collarbone. And you're looking in this picture from the front. This is the rib cage. This is the serratus or the shoulder muscles. I haven't drawn in the pectoralis muscle, which come from the upper arm to the rib cage, but I wanted to illustrate in this picture here that the horse's rib cage trunk hangs off the front limb. However, not every horse is absolutely symmetric in the pink area, the muscles, which I can train,
Right.
and also not symmetric in the structure, the bones. See how this upper arm is different here versus that upper arm? Okay, so because I cannot put a photo, like a lead plate or a photo plate between the upper legs, okay, I am not able to x-ray it. I don't have big enough MRIs. As a rider, as a horse owner, as a veterinarian, as a professor, we do not know if it's structural or muscles until the horse is dead.
Right.
So if I ride and I cannot give my saddle more room on the left side where this arrow is, okay? So I want to have the ability to adjust my saddle orthopedically, okay? So when the people say, yeah, it's a non-disposable, my third question would be, would you please tell me how it's adjustable? Oh, yeah, you can stuff it and adjust the tree. That's probably most people say that. Then you would ask, can you also have the independent tree width, tree angle? Yeah. Can you make the tree bigger on one side when my horse is at that weird stage? Because you have to ask yourself, Jill, are you able to ride a horse straight when the saddle sits diagonal on the horse's spine, digs into the front right shoulder? How can you make the horse straight if you do that?
You simply can't.
Right? And yet there is many experts who say, you can, you just have to shim it. If you shim it, what you do, wherever you put the shim in, you put excess pressure on that area.
Right.
Because the saddle wants to fall in that side because the bigger shoulder is going to come. Shoulders move like pistons up and down and want to go through that, but it's too tight, it's not open. So they're twisted. So if you shim it, okay, you put uneven pressure. So your saddle is even, but what's your most important aid? It's your seat. And if your seat is uneven, that's what the shimming will do. What you're creating, you're creating an uneven horse. It's a vicious cycle. If my padding is not even, and my saddle doesn't sit even, and the pressure is not even, my horse cannot develop straight. And you can say, well, that sounds pretty mean. Well, that is not true. Well, then trust the horse. Take a gait analysis, take a thermography.
Well, you don't even need those. The whole time you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, we just had the muscle therapist out yesterday, and she was working on one of our horses that just came back from the trainer. And he looked like his top line had lost a little condition. Yeah. And she was like, what happened? And I was like, well, he went to the trainer while my boss is on vacation. And she was like, whatever she was riding in, she's sitting really heavy on her right seat bone. And I was like, I would be willing to bet that because his left shoulder is bigger, the saddle doesn't fit and it's sitting off to the right. And that's why it may not be her fault. It might be that her saddle's getting kicked off to the side.
Absolutely.
And he was so sore. I mean, his back, she was just barely pressing, and it looked like Aurora Borealis under there, just twitching all on that right side and nothing on the left. So I fully understand. You don't even need all of that. It's
Yeah,
very
but
obvious.
you have always the naysayers and always the people who may not have tools to correct that problem or wants to sell saddles like disposable saddles. They're
Mhm.
trying to come up with all kinds of unlogical things, and people fall for it,
Right.
and that's why it says, data doesn't lie. But your story is so true. Okay, then what's the next question?
So, when shopping for saddles, what are some things that people don't typically consider? Like, what are the little things that you should look for? Like, one of the things that I think about a lot is the stirrup bar. Like, I feel like I never see that talked about and how
Mhm.
that can affect so much.
Absolutely. Number 9, right? It points to the Stirrup bar. These are 9 important factors to fit the rider. And if you don't fit the rider first, you can never get the saddle to fit for a longer period on the horse. You just can't. Okay, so my tip is always, okay, yes, you might find a horse what is even like this horse, but 7 out of 10 horses are like this. Not always structural, mainly muscle. But if you can't get to start with your horse, so start off by looking at the horse from the rear. Take a picture from your horse when it's standing straight. You will see 7 out of 10 horses main core to the right in the hollow side, and the bigger left shoulder, that's where you would open the tree, is bigger. Okay, so you consider when you have a horse like that, most people don't consider that the saddle sits behind the shoulder, and deep in their mind, they want that saddle to work when they do jumping, dressage, pleasure riding, barrel racing, whatever, right? Then you sit on top, you put the girth on, you put pads on. How is that shoulder to go through that? Only if you have the right angle and a wide enough tree for that shoulder to come through.
Mm-hmm.
And right after that, okay, if you're a Western rider, you don't need to worry about this because all Western saddles have the bars at least a fist wide. Or average horse, a man's fist or hand width is 10 centimeter, 4 inches. This is only 3.5. That's too small. You're sitting on the spinal nerves. Okay?
Right.
You can
Most
use
English saddles look like that,
yeah,
if not smaller.
you can use thermography after a ride. You don't need to ride long. You see all the heat. You can wait until you see the little deformation. Sure, you can do operal procedure, but why? Yeah, you can go ahead and go and get this cut apart on top, but down here in these holes, right, deep down, when you put pressure on it, the average hole where the nerves come out is oval and big. They start to go smaller and smaller and smaller. Here again, oval and large to smaller and round. So that's when they get pinched nerves, right? When they say, oh my God, my horse is wobbler. Oh, I can't ride him anymore. So this has been for thousands of years well known, stay off the horse's spine. Okay, only when Industrial Revolution came, we came to start to make something really, really nasty. I call that the clothespin fit. Okay, so make sure when you buy a saddle, is the saddle designed to pinch the spine? Okay, right, because if that's happened, right, the horse will get dry spots. Okay, here's something like that. Here's the cross section of the withers. You're pinching these 3 muscles, which the horse needs to balance themselves, and you on top, he needs to balance too. So these 3 muscles, they're very thin. This longest muscle, longissimus dorsi, super strong, super supportive. So if you have too much pressure on the spine or the tree width is not wide enough, how are these muscles supposed to contract? And see how the shoulder, boom, comes back. Watch this area here. You see the shoulder load up and sack, it came back. Right? So that's what most people don't consider. When they buy a saddle, they do not allow that shoulder to come through because the tree width is not big enough.
Gotcha.
So don't make the mistake and end up with saddles which are just too narrow for the spine, because the spine has the ligament, then the muscle here, the called multifidus, and these nerves, they react less than grape pressure. Grape pressure is when you squish a grape. You don't need a lot of pressure on that spot. What's the next question?
Ugh. Every time I start hearing about kissing spine and clothespin fit, that's what I wrote Zoe in, and she has kissing spine and has had surgery, and it's just the whole thing is a nightmare. So anyone listening, avoid. I'm dealing with the repercussions of not knowing.
So that's why I love that question, and that was so good you asked that. And that's besides the gullet tree width and tree angle, it's the gullet width. You know, here's the multifidus muscle from the top. Just look where it goes all the way along.
Right.
Don't mess with that. Okay? Very, very important.
Can't even imagine. Like I'm super ticklish on my back. So any like random pressure close to my spine, I'm like twitching away. I can't imagine being a horse with a saddle stuck there and then, 100 to 200, 300 pounds on your back on those muscles. No thanks.
I like that you said ticklish, because most people are ticklish on the bottom of the feet because there is a lot of nerve endings. And on your spine, you have also a lot of nerve endings. I love that comparison. Good job.
It's very weird because most people are not ticklish on their back, but the feet nerve endings ended up in my back. I'm not ticklish on my feet, but I'm very ticklish on my back. So I got the reverse there. Mm. But question number 3 is, and I think this one's going to be fun. What are some myths or marketing gimmicks to watch out for? Because I know that there are a lot, like the saddle fits every horse.
That's, for example, it, right? Mm-hmm. And the way they do it, they have the narrow channel, right? The clothespin. Then they make the saddle nice and long so it digs into the lumbar. And by making it hollow in the middle, which is bridge fit, which means it looks like that, has no contact in the middle, so it digs in the back. So they say, oh, look how nice the saddle sits. It doesn't move. Neither does the horse's back. And what you create is what they call a circus trot. The hind leg is way out, totally overloaded, the front leg. And then here we got the false trot, which is unfortunately a big no-no, and yet sometimes rewarded with big marks.
Almost always rewarded, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. And it has nothing to do with what is written in the classical books or in the rule book of the FEI. So that is what is the biggest myth, because they say, hey, if Olympian so-and-so rides in it, then that's how saddle has to fit. They want that saddle to sit like that. Right. And just like they do on these horses, when they make the rider sit really, really far back, then the horse hollows. Then they get that false elevation to get it up like this. Mm-hmm. And then you add the clothespin fit to it. You have the perfect storm, or what we call the modern fit. That is the biggest myth out there, that this is supposed to be the proper fit of saddles.
Yeah, the bridge fit reminds me almost of like a Pessoa system on the horse's back. Like it's trying to force the back end down and the front end down, but it's doing the exact opposite because it's just,
people would do that to themselves, what they do to the horses sometimes, so they get awake.
You and me both, in so many different regards.
Yeah, maybe with our effort to educate people will slowly but surely see the light.
I hope so. I really do believe it's getting better, and I hope that to see it continue on this path. It's just education and making it more accessible, I think. And then trying not to get in arguments with people that argue with science. But anyway, so are you ready to move on to number 4?
Yeah.
How do you check if a saddle that's available for sale online will fit the horse or not? What can you look for if you don't have the saddle in front of you? Because as somebody that sells saddles, I don't like to send them on trial because I'm like, am I going to get my saddle back? I'm like, you can pay for it and then I'll send it to you. So I imagine many sellers are similar. So how could you gauge that it might fit the horse long distance, which is like hard without it being.
In today's world, it's super easy because all you can say to them, would you do me a favor and turn the saddle upside down and measure with your hand how much the widest part is on the gullet and how much the narrow part is. So you ask them to put the hand in the front, in the middle, and the very end. Okay. And if the end doesn't have 10 centimeters, says, thank you, not interested, because there is no horse what tolerates pressure on that spot. Right here, right? And some of the saddles are too long. This is such a vulnerable spot. Okay? Why would you hit these nerve endings there? Just to make the horse go all owie in the back, okay? And just to say, I wonder why my horse has a hunter bump now. I wonder why my horse has all this sacroiliac joint issue. I wonder why my horse tilts in the spine. Okay? Why? So this is the number one. I mean, we can go on and on and on, but I was thinking long and hard. I would go with this one here because everything else, how do you know? So if the channel doesn't fit, don't even bother.
I think that one's also a pretty quick, like, rule it out easily, because I've been looking for some for like, we get a lot of horses coming through here. Like, can we have maybe a not super expensive saddle that we can use on maybe the young ones? And just like looking through them, it's like you move super quickly when you check the gullet width because or the channel width, because most of them are like this wide. It's ridiculous.
For me, okay. It's like this, buying a used car. Can you open the hood? Is there a motor in? Yes or no?
Right.
If there's no motor in, I don't buy it. If there's no
minimum,
I don't buy it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's other things. Does the motor work? Is the saddle tree not broken? Blah, blah, blah. But this is my answer to that one question. The number one. That's a really good answer.
Yeah. So what about for the rider? If you're shopping online, like what would you look for the rider to make sure?
That's a little bit more difficult, but you can do the same thing. You see how the rider puts the hand in the channel? Mm-hmm. Ask the rider to show you a saddle from the top. Okay, just to see. Say, can I see the saddle from the top? Okay, so right here, where the number 4 is, and the 6 and the number 2. Just say, where you sit, could you place your hand in between? So if you talk to a 5-year-old, you know that the hand is very small. If you feel like this person is an adult, deep voice, looks like a man hand, so you can think that's most likely 4 inches wide. Women is more about 3.5 to 3. It depends how petite her hands are. And then you can see if this seam is too narrow. So if you're a girl and that seam is not at least at the narrow spot. Okay, let me back up a little bit. Okay, this narrow spot can be very far forward or very far back. So the easiest way for you to see if you are born with a female pelvis is go to the center, from the pommel to the back, go right to the center, then go 3 inch forward and 3 inch back. 3 inch forward, what's the distance from the seaming? For a girl, gotta be a minimum of 2 inches. In the back, a minimum of 9 inches. So if you're a guy, you wouldn't want to buy it because you want something in the back under 8, in the front under 1. It's very simple. And you know right from the get-go, does it even come close to fit you? Sorry to be so rude. In your crotch, in your seat, in your leg. I don't know else how to say it. Because if I don't have a good seat, I don't have anything as a rider. Nothing.
Right. Yes, that is super important. I know the difference in riding in a clothespin and one that fit me a little bit better. And I'm like, I've really been fighting the saddle for like 4 years, and because it makes my pelvis tip back. And so I'm stuck and I've got low back issues for forever because I rode like that for like 4 or 5 years. Awful. But okay, number 6 here. What are some signs that the saddle doesn't fit when the horse is standing still? So if you've got the saddle on the horse and it's stationary.
For the rider, it's easy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You totally relax. And in that relaxed position, you should have a perpendicular line. Okay. Take your feet out of the stirrup. When you're relaxed, don't sit like you just drank 2 bottles of tequila. Okay. Just sit there proud, sit upright, shoulders back, right? And lift your chest. And does your leg just fall underneath you? Or like in this case, your knees turn out, the toes turn out. Right there from the get-go, you know that the sweet spot places you behind the center of gravity of the horse. You're not sitting over your leg, and you're sitting what we call in bouncy land. That's
Right.
the way standing still. For the horse, well, I think we talked about this before. Each saddle has a D-ring. Okay, and the D-ring, okay, is right there.
Mm-hmm.
And where the D-ring is, I measure sometimes how far back and how much saddle I have where the D-ring is to my leg to the front of the saddle. Okay, so bigger the pommel, so further back the rider sits. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Sure
because you
does.
can't sit over here.
Right.
Saddles are designed to come really far forward. So anyway, for the horse, if I want to see how does it fit my horse, where that D-ring is, okay, where this particular D-ring is, there you can see it. I take a pencil, and if the saddle is on the horse, stand still, no girth, no pad, no rider, I want that pen falling where the D-ring is of the saddle, or western where the contour is. If the saddle does not let the pen fall through here, the second you girth on top, the second you put a saddle pad in between, the second you sit on top, it's now pinching the withers a lot. And the veterinarian call that the vice grip of the saddle. Why do they use that harsh word? Well, if I'm thinking back in breeding times, this muscle here, the longest muscle where saddles always rest, does not come in the wither cup. The muscle doesn't run where the wither cup is. This area here calls the wither cup. Okay, that's this area the pencil needs to fall through. That's approximately 4 inches. It needs to make contact below 4 inches. I got to sit on this muscle. If it hits the wither muscle, when stallion bite in this area, the horse goes hollow, hind leg out, and he won't go forward. Now, if you prefer to ride like that, then ignore what I just said with the pencil.
And if you don't like your horse, carry
If you don't
on.
like your horse, you want to cripple his front leg, go for it. If you do like your horse and you want that horse's back to come up, haunches underneath, lift up the leg, and he wants to go forward, make sure when your saddle is loose on the horse standing, this pen falls under the D-ring in the front. That's probably the number one thing I can give you 10 more tips, but that will take more than just half an hour.
I'm sure you could do 50.
Yeah. But that's, I think, the number one. I mean, when we do it next time, we maybe can come back to this because I love the way you set this up this time, because this is really super helpful for people. In the end of the day, we're always looking for a saddle or looking for problem solving, right? So that these are good questions.
Yeah, most of them are ones that I've been asked before, and then I was like, what as a saddle shopper would I want to know,
of course,
look for, and what do most people not know? So the only other question that I really had here is for the telltale signs that it doesn't fit the horse and rider when they're in motion. There's a lot of videos, like when people are jumping up the saddle, coming up, a foot in the back over the jump. So, obviously that is probably not a fantastic indication, but.
So let's start with this picture here. Okay, the ultimate goal is when I do spinning with my Western horse, jumping, cabriolet, bareback riding with the saddle, doesn't matter. I want to sit in a so-called sweet spot. And all of us riders have to sit behind or in front of the horse's movement. And that's an awful feel. So
Right.
if my chest and my ball of my foot and the horse's sternum is in one line, okay, 90% I can do spins, I can do barrel racing, I can do piaffe passage, I can jump. I'm sitting very light on the horse. Okay?
Right.
If this balance of the rider is off, okay, something like this, where you sit way back here. Okay, so no matter how much this lady is going to try, there is no way she gets her leg underneath. She sits in an area. So what is the sign? Typical sign, if it doesn't fit the rider, is chair seat, because that
Right.
saddle is absolutely balanced. That saddle is just very narrow in the seat bones. See, this is the pelvis from the bottom here, what you see? See the seat bones hanging over the edge?
Right.
If he would be a guy born with a male pelvis, you're inside. So if it smashes your crotch or hurts your seat bone, you pushes yourself back to the widest part of the saddle. So that's a typical sign. Typical sign is when people ride with round shoulders. Okay, so that is a common sign. Sensitive or long-term pain is what people feel sometimes. If you have hip pain when you ride or after you ride, that's a clear sign the saddle doesn't fit. Sometimes the rider's leg falls asleep. The reason why that is because inside your thigh, you got this nerve called sciatic nerve. Okay, so if that doesn't fit you in your upper inner thigh, remember we talked about this? Look how narrow that is on the girl versus on the boy, or male versus female. Okay, it's just how our bone structure is different from sex to sex.
Right.
So, and if the saddle is poking you in the crotch, you're going to avoid it. So you don't have to say, well, let me warm up first. No, subconsciously, your body goes into protection mode. So this is how you can tell the rider fights the saddle. Okay, so
Right.
that's the typical sign for the rider fights the saddle. For the horse, well, I always say right from the get-go, watch how the horses move, watch what the horse does, because horses don't know how to lie. You know, they don't. We making all these excuses. We say, "Oh, this horse hates girls, or hates men,
Right.
or he doesn't like to work Monday." We come up with all these funny sayings, and then tell me, please, why does this horse go like nuts when you approach him with the saddle, and then when you borrow your friend's saddle, the horse is just as calm as a little lamb? I mean, how much clearer can it be? Start paying
Very
attention.
honest.
You know, pay attention when you approach the horse, when you girth up the saddle. Are they moving around? Are they swishing with the tail? And don't make a mistake, if there's a fly, no, he swished with the tail. The saddle doesn't fit. Use your common sense. You know, if you're in an area where tons of flies are, that's a different story.
For sure.
You'll hear a lot of people who say, I need to warm up first. I have learned from several body workers, osteopaths, physiotherapists, massage therapists, horse trainers. When you watch the behavior of a horse, do not wait for a long time until the nerves are numb. The horse, if he doesn't have trough or lipstick or foam in his mouth in the first 6 to 8 circles, the horse is not chewing. No, I'm not saying, hey, give him sugar or any kind of a treat. So
Whipped cream. Paint it.
You know, that's not what I'm talking about. The horse needs to chew. You know, so the horse will hide the pain, but sometimes the pain is too high, right? Typical sign, they buck a couple of times until the saddle is pushed forward if it's too long. Or they trip, or they do 4-beat canter, or they pace in the trot, and it's not a trotter. The other sign is, yes, you can make this by cranking the nose, but when the horse bites his chest or it's breaking on the wrong pole, that's definitely a sign the horse is uncomfortable. The other sign, what is very typical, is when you approach a fence, he goes up with his head or he just runs away. He says, oh, he's just in the beginning like this. After he's warmed up, he's fine. Why? Because his nerves are numb. right? So sometimes I always say to people, do not wait. You don't need to wait long. The horse is very, very honest, and it will tell you very quick if the saddle fits or doesn't fit. Okay. Right. Unfortunately, many horses go because they're the master of hiding pain. And when the horse has a deformity, atrophy in the saddle support area, deformity in the croup, pain line in the shoulders, then the customer starts to think, maybe these lots and lots of saddle pads don't work, or I see horses, they lose their gait, and all of a sudden, look at this horrible canter, that poor animal. Like there's so many bones fused. There's no movement in the sacroiliac joints. All the top line is pressed away, and that horse is totally seized up. So that's how you can tell if a horse is telling you, I don't like it.
Right. And usually by the time that they're bucking or doing naughty behaviors under saddle, they're screaming. They have been in pain for quite some time. They're just been polite about it up until now.
Yeah. You got to remember that we have 5 senses, they have 6 senses. They sense danger or pain way before we. So look at the little signs.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This has been super great. I hope that everyone watching now and later will have taken something from it. I know I took several things from it. I always enjoy these officially.
That's awesome. Hey, listen, where do you live again?
Arkansas.
Is that hot where you are right now?
We're dying.
Oh.
It's like 105 real feel out right now.
Oh my God.
It's dreadful.
So are you riding in the morning?
I haven't been needing to, because everyone seems to be cycling through hoof issues right now. So,
you tell me when you start riding with that cool saddle of yours.
I'm so excited. I want to so bad. I just need somebody to decide to be sound or old enough to ride.
All right.
But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay well.
Yes, you too.
You too. Bye-bye.